Appreciate you having me, Sari. Hey, everybody. I am getting into the race for Congress here in my home district, Michigan's 7th Congressional District, super swing, super purple district here in mid-Michigan. Going to be launching really heavily on this message that I have been delivering across the country and here at home in Michigan, which is standing up to Betsy DeVos and these right-wing billionaires who've been coming for our public schools, trying to defund our public schools, now trying to defund our healthcare investments,
Yeah.
take away SNAP and food assistance from families, disinvest from families in my community and those across the country. And we're going to be going strong on this. We launched just a few days ago, raised $100,000 in our first 24 hours just on this message alone of standing up to Betsy DeVos and saving our public schools. So super excited about this, and it's going to be a lot of work, but ready for it.
Yeah. So tell us about your district. It's
Yeah.
one of those swing districts, right? It's a toss-up
is.
district, as they say.
Yeah.
Who I'm from New York, New Jersey
Yeah.
area. I know Michigan, but not
Yeah.
not district by district.
Sure.
Tell me a bit about who your future constituents will be when you win this
Yeah.
race.
So geographically, it's a big district. We have 5 whole counties in the right smack in the middle of the district and pieces of a couple others. There's a guy in there right now, is a right-wing congressman, a MAGA congressman who happened to come in on the Trump wave, such as it was in 2024. First termer has been in there a few months. Used to be Alyssa Slotkin's old seat. For those of you who know, Senator Slotkin represented this space for several years now. So it's really gone back and forth. And the guy that won sort of eked out a win a few months ago, and really hasn't had a chance, honestly, to run as a moderate or to represent as a moderate in our district, because that's really what our district is. But instead has been just follow the Trump line straight down. Sometimes you see these news stories of so-called moderate Republicans who had thoughts and concerns about gut and Medicaid, for example. 12 or 15 of those congressmen, and of course they voted for the thing anyway. Well, this guy wasn't even on that list of moderates. This has been this has been sending letters out bragging about the big beautiful bill or the big ugly bill that he voted for. So we're going to be talking about this all the time, and who's in Congress matters for all of us, whichever district it is, right? So, this is going to be a big part of our campaign.
Yeah. So how is this big ugly bill going to affect your districts?
Yeah, about 1 in 3 families here have somebody using Medicaid or Medicaid expansion, which in my state, in Michigan, is called the Healthy Michigan Plan. So 1 in 3 families at risk there. Now, the other side has been saying, well, those cuts don't come till later. I would just say, healthcare is one of those things like schools, right? Like how many folks are reassured by the idea that you're not going to lose healthcare tomorrow, you're going to just lose it next year, or your school is going to be okay this year, it's just not going to be okay next year. I'm not sure if people make decisions about healthcare or education or retirement or any of those things based on a month-to-month basis. So we're going to be reminding people of that. And I think that's relevant, by the way, for folks all over the country, because this is Republicans' plan now is don't worry, those terrible cuts we voted for don't take effect for quite a few years. That means you better start planning for what we did to you now and get ready to and I think that's something that we should be all talking about regardless of where they live.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because that's the argument. Like, don't worry, it'll just affect you in a couple of years. Like, well, how is that comforting? Like,
who plans that way?
Yeah, enjoy your life now, because in a couple of years, it's all going to hell and you're going to not be able to get the services you deserve as an American, as human beings.
Think about that, like with, if you and I are probably roughly the same age, we've probably got parents roughly the same age. They're still around. You think about like parents' long-term care, right? Medicare, Medicaid. Like we don't think, okay, don't worry, 3 or 4 years from now, we might have a healthcare crisis. But we're good for now. Like this is their message on this, and we're going to be talking about that tomorrow, right? Like this is a plan, and none of it needed to happen. By the way, they didn't need to gut healthcare at all. All of it is just to pay for tax cuts for people like Betsy DeVos, and we're going to be reminding families of this every single day.
Yeah, so folks who aren't familiar with Betsy DeVos, or they might know her name, us in the education space, we know her effects on places like New York.
Yeah.
Who is this person? She's quite a Michigan figure, isn't she?
Yeah, she is,
Yeah.
but she is, and I'll quote my friend Catherine Stewart, the author on
Mhm.
this. She is the DeVos family from Western Michigan is responsible for a good chunk of right wing Republican spending for the last 30 years across the country. If you've been inundated with, whether it's a voucher scheme in your state, whether it's other arguments about privatizing schools, whether it's taking away reproductive rights for half the people in this country, chances are it was funded by the DeVos family in one way or another. That starts right now with Betsy DeVos, who's a
Yeah.
member of the family, billionaire heiress, and her life's work has been to privatize public schools. 23 states over the last 3 years, when you and I started working together, being friends,
Mhm. Mhm.
because of this push they've had all over the country to privatize schools through voucher schemes. That comes from Betsy DeVos, first and
Yeah.
foremost, all over the country, even though
20
she lives here
so 23 states
and
have
counting.
and counting. Wow.
Yeah.
So how has that affected Michigan, for example?
Yeah. So vouchers are really unpopular with voters, as it turns out, which is why you need
Mm.
billionaire heiresses to ram them through state legislatures and to ram them through Congress. There's a new voucher scheme and is part of the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
So Betsy DeVos is, you spend a lot of money on this. In Michigan, they haven't quite been able to get it over the hurdle. Vouchers have face planted the last couple times they've gone to voters here, including just a couple of years ago, voters they couldn't get enough signatures, frankly, to get it even on the ballot. But
Interesting.
but uh, but they've had more luck in different states. So I was doing a lot of work down in Kentucky in the fall of
Mm.
24 on the voucher
Mhm.
issue there, with Governor Beshear's team down
Yeah.
there. 65% of Kentucky voters voted for Donald Trump on election day, and 65% of voters voted against Betsy DeVos's voucher scheme on the very same ballot. This is a
Really?
bipartisan issue, this opposition to vouchers. It's not just red, it's not just blue. And this is one of the reasons I think it's landing so well in my district right now. People, listen, we all know that we need public schools to make some improvements. We want to renew and reinvest in them. God knows
Mhm.
we got to make sure that every school is working for every child, but they really don't want Betsy DeVos telling them how to do that. And they
Right.
really don't want those schools to be gutted to give everyone a coupon to walk away, whether it's here in mid Michigan or anywhere in the country.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people don't exactly know, like, you are the expert, if not one of the experts on vouchers. And I think some people don't fully understand how they end up hurting families more
Yeah.
than helping them. Or you hear a
Yeah.
lot about like parental choice and
Right.
parental rights, which we can also talk about today. But what are vouchers exactly? Like I
So,
really don't think people
yeah.
get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so vouchers are basically a coupon system where you're given
Okay.
some number of dollars, $7,000, $8,000, what it is, whatever. It
Mhm.
varies by state,
Mhm.
and you can use that money to go to private school. Increasingly, the last couple of years, you can use it to go to Amazon and get homeschool equipment like big screen TVs if you want to homeschool your kid. It depends on
Really?
the state and how it's written. Amazon's the second biggest vendor of taxpayer funded dollars next to private schools tuition itself. Number two is Amazon for this reason.
I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, one other important thing to know though is that when it comes to these voucher schemes, the schools do the choosing, not the parents. All right, 70%, 75% of voucher users are already in private school to begin with. And so one of the things that sort of really brought me
Ah,
into the fight here was specifically this issue that this stuff was being sold to families all over the country, maybe families who felt like, yeah, I do need to see a little more out of my public school for it to live
yeah,
up to the promise of public education that works for everyone.
right.
And then they would take this voucher and then they would find there's no room for them at the end. They couldn't get into the school they wanted. They ended up not being able to use it at all. And so this
Oh,
is one
interesting.
one way that these schemes really hurt families is they sell them false promise. I've called vouchers education's equivalent of predatory lending for that reason.
Mhm.
The other thing to
Mhm.
know about these schemes, because this is important to this larger debate we're in about healthcare, about food assistance, about everything else, is it really cannibalizes the budget. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is uh, it comes out of states' ability to pay for other things, whether it's public schools, whether it's water quality, whether it's down in Arizona. Believe it or not, they had to borrow from the state's opioid settlement to pay for pieces of the State Department of Corrections to pay for the voucher scheme there. That's something I was
What?
fighting here in Michigan, and that's the kind of thing that you see going on all over the country right now. So this is a matter of where your priorities are, and this is a good example of the fight we're in.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so grateful that you're running for office. So when elected, what can you I mean, we know what you can do at the state level. You've been working with a lot of stakeholders there.
Yeah.
What can you do at the federal level from Congress to fight vouchers at this point? Like what can you be doing once elected?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. So first of all, we got to get rid of the federal voucher scheme that they just shoved into the big ugly
Mhm.
bill, big beautiful bill, whatever you want to call it. But I
Yeah.
also think it's part of this larger conversation. What's going on in the federal government right now is eh, the federal investments in public schools have actually been fairly limited as a share of the dollars going in. Most the dollars
Mhm.
that fund public schools come from states or from local districts.
Yeah.
But it's a really important part of those investments is coming from the federal government. So,
Yeah.
uh, investments in public schools that serve lower income communities, even at this point, middle income communities. A lot of the public schools serving working families. A lot of
Mhm.
the investments, for example, we've had a lot of conversations about Medicaid. Medicaid is a major funder and investor in public schools as well, not just healthcare specifically, but Medicaid helps fund ramps in schools, school nurses, nutritional programs, physical therapy programs. So when we talk about cuts to Medicaid, we're talking about public schools as well. When you've got
Right.
Congress who is more interested in giving voucher coupons to kids already in private school, more interested in gutting Medicaid, more interested in gutting SNAP. Oh, and by the way, you've got a Trump administration that's pulling back $9 billion in
Yes.
your public school. Forget what Congress is doing, just pulling back those dollars and withholding things that Congress have already said goes into it.
Yeah.
For if Congress had a spine, if the guy who is in office right now in my district had a spine. If the
Mhm.
Republicans in Congress actually stood up for the office they took an oath to hold, and to the voters they took an oath of office to protect and to serve, they would be telling Donald Trump themselves, "You cannot rob these schools of their dollars. You should not
Right.
fund these tax cuts for billionaires like Betsy DeVos instead of healthcare." So those are the kinds of things that you can do when you go to Congress is to
Yeah.
put a stop to this madness and turn the conversation back into investing in families. And that's what I'm going to do.
And I'm so excited for you to get there, and that's so what can folks do to help you right now in this race?
I appreciate that. So, learn more about me. You could go to my website, which is joshcowenmi.com. So it's JoshCowenM as in Michigan I.com. JoshCowenMI.com. Maybe we can put that in a chat or something
Yeah,
like
we'll put
that.
that in the chat. Yeah, yeah.
Would love to, this is a political campaign, which means we gotta get all the support we can. Eventually we'll be at a point where volunteers and phone calls are all those sort of things. But right now, anybody is able to chip in a few bucks. I know costs are super high because of what this guy in office is doing right
Yeah.
now. Just a
Oh,
few
God.
dollars a month would be really super helpful to us. As I mentioned, we raised $100,000 from ordinary folks on
That's
in
amazing.
one day on Thursday, just responding to this message. But we got to keep it up now, and that's a big amount of money for one day especially for a first time candidate. But we got to keep
Mhm.
it up. So that's the first thing, and then just tell your friends, right? Share our stuff. Go to our website. We're all over socials. That's that same Josh Cowen MI is that X platform, Blue Sky, Insta, all that sort of stuff. We're there, and we're going to be probably the most visible. At least we aim to be the most visible candidate across the country, really talking about investing in public schools in particular.
And as a teacher who's been in public schools for 23 years and a product of public schools, I'm so grateful for that. And so speaking of my kind of origins in this
Yeah,
work,
please.
I wanna yeah, yeah. I wanted to hear your origin story. Like, what got you originally so dedicated to the mission of protecting our public schools? And
Yeah.
then I want to hear then from that work in the university level to then deciding that it's time to actually get into the federal government and make change
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So, at least locally, just I'll say, two of my my two daughters have graduated from Williamston Public Schools here in Michigan, mid Michigan, so local public school district. They're now in
Mhm.
college. My son's still there. So just
Nice.
in a very basic way, public schools in our district have been there for my kids, and certainly want to contribute to just protecting public schools for everyone, of course. But as far as the longer term stuff, I mean, my life's work as an educator,
Yeah.
as a union member, by the way, myself,
Yes.
has been to try to find ways to improve public schools where they need to improve, and also defend public schools where they need to be defended. Right? I mean, like any organizations, any families, we've got always got work to do, but we've got to save the things that we value and the things that work for everybody, and then we need to build off of the things that don't quite. That's always been what I was doing. There was a period of time where, before what Betsy DeVos was trying to do over the last 3 years to privatize public schools with voucher schemes,
Mhm.
there were a number of what are called targeted voucher programs in smaller portions, not statewide, but in certain cities like
Okay.
Cleveland, Ohio, like Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mhm.
And I was, as a young researcher, was doing some work trying to evaluate those, honestly calling balls and strikes. Didn't necessarily think they would work, but didn't necessarily come out there as with much of a foregone conclusion going into it. Your job was to essentially audit those programs, see what they were doing.
Yeah.
Maybe in a small scale they were doing something to
Right.
help kids. Turned out that wasn't the case.
Mm.
Um, and the research community and the policy community, both parties, kind of moved on to doing other things.
Huh.
And then 3-4 years ago, Betsy DeVos launched this massive nationwide campaign to keep doing it all over again.
Mhm.
They have spent $350 million over the last several years to bring vouchers across the country, and they have gotten back $3.5 billion in taxpayer funding for these voucher schemes. That means that for every $1 Betsy DeVos and her right wing billionaire friends have put into privatizing public schools, they've gotten back $100 in taxpayer funding for what they're trying to do. That level of intensity for stuff we knew was hurting kids, just on test scores alone, by the way. I know test
Yeah.
scores aren't the end all be all, but
Yeah.
hurting kids at worse the rate than Katrina did to their academic outcomes, as an example.
Jesus.
I felt like I had to kind of say something because I knew something about it.
Yeah.
And I said it once, I said it a second time, I said it a third time, and by then you're kind of out there, and you get kicked around by the DeVos people. They go
Mhm.
after you, and I
I've seen
wasn't
that.
intimidated, and I know
Yeah.
you have, and
Yeah.
it stinks the first time, but eventually you say, you know what, I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm still here, and so this is the fight that I decided to sort of say, now it's time to bring it somewhere else. We've got
Yeah.
this madman in the White House. Frankly, he's running around doing. It's not just on schools, but on healthcare, on
Mhm.
jobs, on the cost of living, which no one can afford anymore at this point, unless you're a billionaire
No.
like DeBoss.
Right.
I think this fight against privatizing public schools really suited me well to what's needed next, especially
Yeah.
for my community and communities like mine across the country, and that's where we're going.
I'm so appreciative that you're doing that, and it's so, so great to have a friend, an advocate, and fighter, a true fighter for public schools in office. So, also a big part of this DeVos movement, aside from just the voucher system, but also just an attack on public education.
It is.
And that's something I've been really, as you know, passionate about. And we've seen them staging it in Trump 1.0. And then we started seeing their work with their quote unquote anti CRT, divisive concepts, whatever they want to call them, laws starting in
Sure.
2021. And what terrified me about a Trump 2.0 is the fact that, like, then they were gonna do this stuff on the federal level like they were trying to do when he was president the first time, and now we're seeing it, right? So, it's not just if it's not just trying to get people not to be going to the public schools and
Yeah.
using public money to go to these private schools if they can get into them, or now that I've learned that they're spending the number 2 um, beneficiary of this voucher money is Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, that's enraging. There's no words for it, actually. Enraging
Yeah.
isn't the word,
Yeah.
right? So, what are your thoughts? Because this thing you've been researching, and I think we've talked about how you've met some of these people in the DeVos
Yeah.
world who've been trying to
Yeah.
take down public education. What's
Yeah.
their motivation? Why do they have such a problem with public education aside from the fact they can't profit off of it?
Yeah.
Is there something else going on here?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first and foremost, what Betsy DeVos has said is that she wants these voucher schemes because she thinks that public schools shouldn't be centers of community to her. And she says that public schools got in the way of churches as centers of community. I'm a Christian man. I've talked
Yes.
about this publicly all over the country. I worship every week. I just don't accept the idea that the premise of that question that you have to that there's a choice between strong investments in public schools and a strong commitment to whatever faith tradition that you're a part of. Those are just false choices, and they're used by folks like Betsy DeVos to try to divide. When in fact, public schools are really the great kind of can be at their best anyway, can be
Yeah.
a really big source of unifying forces in a community. I've seen this all over the country, both here in Michigan and across the country. Republicans and Democrats standing up for their public school funding, maybe having different differences of opinion about how to take the next step in improving public schools or making sure public schools in their community live up to the promise, but
Mhm.
fundamentally want their public schools funded. So that's the first thing is just the, folks like DeVos just want everything private. The
Yeah.
second thing, and we just need to be honest about this, is and I say this as a member of a labor union. I say this as someone who's worked
Mhm.
closely with labor unions all over the country. A lot of this comes down to deep hostility to labor unions. It's just the
Mhm.
bottom line for folks like Betsy
Mhm.
DeVos, for
Mhm.
folks like Charles Koch and the Koch network. You find me a right wing think tank or advocacy group that's running around yelling about public schools, chances are they're funded by one or two or both of those people. And the thing that holds them together is deep hostility to labor unions and to the working families that are
Yeah.
in those labor unions. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it is just trying to beat up on our
Our
labor
labor.
brothers and sisters. Yeah,
Yeah, and just further continue the inequity of wealth in this country, which
that's
I
right.
mean, the Gilded Age Redux, right? That's what they're working on. Like,
Yeah.
as a history teacher, I know the next stage was progressive era, but like you were saying, folks don't have time to wait for their progressive era to kick in, right? And
It's amazing,
yeah,
right? And it's that's one of the arguments that they all make, whether it's these chaotic tariffs that Trump is trying to put in place
okay,
right now, that driving up costs for everybody, whether it's those Betsy DeVos voucher schemes. The argument is always 10 years from now, it'll be okay. 20 years from now, it'll be okay. This generation is going to have to suffer some pain, but maybe decades from now, it'll be okay. It never turns out that way. Have you noticed
no,
that? Like, it never turns out that way.
never.
Unless you're a billionaire, then you're fine. So I think it's something that we really have to talk about. Like this is a today issue, and these promises that they're making for 5 or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, uh, there's no track record that they have that any of it's going to come true at all. And we just need to kind of talk about investing in families tomorrow, today and tomorrow, not 10 years from now.
Yeah, and that's not the radical concept, right? Like they like to portray public school and fighting for working families as a Marxist or socialist, which of course are buzzwords to make people freak out. But I would say the true radicals are the people or the people like in the DeVos family who are trying to make it so that only a select few can thrive in this country. That to me is radical, right? And I think the other thing I wanted to help you folks through is the Department of Education, right?
Yeah,
There was a lot of talk about that when Trump first came in a couple months ago,
yeah,
him getting rid of the Department of Ed. We have to talk about checks and balances
yeah,
there. But that's where your role comes in, right?
yeah.
Because who can get rid of the Department of Ed, and also why do they want to get rid of it?
They wanna get rid of the Department of Education because the Federal Department of Education for the same reason they wanna get rid of public schools in general, but the US Department of Education, again, it's not a massive amount of money in terms of the
Mhm.
overall portion of the pie going to public schools, but it's a really important portion. So, in my district, for example, $200,000,000, uh, flows through the Department of Ed just to schools that are Title I schools, which means schools
Mhm.
serving lower income families. Uh, a lot of those in my district are rural districts. So those are
Mhm.
200 million plus every year that's supposed to go to rural school districts here in the Michigan 7th that are at risk right now. Also, really important investments in kids with special needs to help fund IDEA programs,
Right.
whether it's just things like specific dyslexia or reading challenges to more physical special needs challenges. There's a lot of Department of Education money that is sent to those kids in those schools that is at risk here. And you don't have to vote against that stuff for it to be at risk, as we just saw with Trump pulling
Yeah.
those dollars back, even though Congress authorized it, Republicans and Democrats. Um, Housing insecure students. Housing is a big issue in parts of my district, as I know it is in lots of places all over the country.
Mhm.
If you are a student or a family without access to safe, reliable housing, often there's additional supports that are offered through your school district that are at risk when the Department of Ed dollars go away. So, all of these investments, and what's the common theme here? If you're not wealthy, if you're not well connected, if you're not a billionaire, you may be screwed. And that's the Trump plan for families in this country. That's the DeVos plan for families in this country, and it's that plan that I'm running to Congress for Congress to fight.
I'm so, so grateful that you're running. So, I'm a history teacher. I always like to think about both how history will remember us and also someone in history, a historical moment that inspires you. So I'll let you take either both of those or one of those. So how do you want to be remembered in history? And is there someone in history that's inspired you forward? Because those are tough questions.
Yeah, yeah, those are tough questions, and I haven't been asked that before. But I guess I would just say,
Yeah.
I just spent the last few minutes sort of fighting Trump and DeVos on this idea that we should wait for 30 years to have investments in families. So I'll say that, from the history standpoint, like, if folks tomorrow just know that I am out there fighting for families, that I'm out there fighting for public schools, that I'm out there fighting for rural hospitals, for healthcare, for everybody, for folks to have the ability to live out the American dream, then that's enough for me to be remembered by. Now, I know you're asking something bigger and grander about that, but like honestly, all we can really do, right, is to be known for the families that we are fighting for. And if that's my legacy, then I certainly would like to be a part of that and just let. But I'd also like to succeed, right? And so
Yeah.
we want to make sure that folks are getting what they absolutely need. The best thing for public schools and for families of public schools would be that no one had ever heard my name, honestly, because I stepped into this arena because Betsy DeVos was trying to defund our public schools.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would just say is that there are folks throughout history who have fought to make uh, help make life better for themselves, for their families, for their communities, for their states, and for their country. And every one of those people, I think you're doing your part. I'm trying to do my part. We're trying to kind of do something that helps make lives better for our families, for our communities, and for our
Mhm.
country. And those are the folks that whose footsteps I'd like to follow in.
And I really think you already have, to be honest. But next
Kind of.
next up is I think you have. And because you're one of the few voices out there who is unstoppable in your support for public education and shining a light on the DeVos family. And that's why when you told me that you were running, I was so excited. And I feel like it just to me, it's like there's a lot to I'm trying really hard in my work to focus on the people like you who are actually trying to make the world a better place instead of focus my attention on all the people who are like the person that you're going to take out of office,
Yeah.
trying to make things only a good place for a select few. So, yeah.
That's really what it comes down to is that we want, this is what I say all over the country is uh, uh, so much at stake right now. We have folks who are really struggling with high costs, insecurity when it comes to their healthcare access, chronically underfunded public schools,
Yeah.
retirement insecurity, right? Like all of these economic issues. At the same time, we also have a democracy that's at risk. And
Yes.
one of the things that I just try to say is, go. People talk about democracy in different ways. Sometimes for them, it's just a matter of like making sure that they have food on the table, or more than food on the table, more enough to be able to not just survive, but also to thrive and invest in their kids' futures. And so, what I always say is, a democracy that works for everyone is an economy that works for everyone, and an economy that works for everyone is a democracy that works for everyone. And that's the message that I'm bringing to this campaign.
I love that. So before we wrap up, can you tell
Yeah,
folks once again, and I'm going to
yeah,
type it in here now,
please do.
where to find you, how to support you,
Yeah.
and just all the facts that we need to help you win this
So
race.
thank you. So check us out at joshcowenmi.com. So that's
Okay.
JOSHCOWEN, M as in Michigan, I.com, joshcowenmi.com. And that's the same connection point on all the different platforms, X's and IG and all of those things.
Yes.
Uh, please chip in a few bucks if you can. I know costs are high, but anything you can give helps us keep this momentum going. And just share our stuff, tell your friends, tell your family, and go out there too and support your public schools, because this is what it's going to take for all of us, is to just keep making sure that all of these investments work for everybody.
Thank you so much, and I truly believe that there's more of us than them, and thank you so much for leading the way in your district. And District 7, Michigan, soon we'll be calling you congressman for
I
sure.
appreciate that, Sarah. Appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for listening. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.